Board of Directors meeting for May 2nd, 2017. Thank you for everyone that's here in our audience and for your patience as we concluded a special meeting that we had earlier this afternoon. Madam Clerk, if you would please read the roll.
Director Hendricks, Director Richardson, Director Peck, Director Hines, Director Wright, Director Wyrick, Director Campuris, Director Fortson, Director Adcock, Vice Mayor Webb, Mayor Stoller.
Here. Let me call on City Director B.J. Wyrick for our invocation, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day and allowing us to meet in this forum to do the people's work. Guide and direct this board in our decisions. Let us be sensitive and thoughtful in fulfilling the citizens' needs in our great city. Heavenly Father, as we move into the summer months, be with our children and young adults in this city. Lead them in the right direction and keep them busy with productive fun and work. Be with our firefighters and police as they perform their duties. Keep them out of harm's way. Thank you for our employees. We ask you to bless them and be with them as they provide services for our city. Grant a special blessing on our police chief, fire chief, our city manager, our mayor, and this board. Grant us the strength and knowledge to lead our city through these trying times. Be with each of us as we travel home. These things we ask in your name. Amen.
Thank you. If you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get into the agenda, I have one proclamation that I'd like to issue. Excuse me, and I'll go down to our front. As all of you know, the city has a multitude of responsibilities as it relates to the safety of our community. And certainly this month is an important month in many different respects. And I'm proud to issue a proclamation today that recognizes the issue of building safety. And it reads as follows: Know ye all people by these present greetings. Whereas our city of Little Rock continues in its efforts to address the critical issues of safety, energy, efficiency, and resilience in the built environment that affect our citizens both in everyday life and in times of natural disaster, and gives us confidence that our structures are safe and sound. And whereas our confidence is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardian building safety and fire prevention officials, our architects, builders, tradespeople, laborers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction of buildings. And whereas these guardians are dedicated members of the International Code Council and use a government consensus approach that brings together local, state, and federal officials with expertise in the built environment to create and implement the highest quality codes to protect Americans in the buildings where we live, work, worship, and play. And whereas the International Codes, the most widely adopted building safety, energy, and fire prevention codes in the nation, are used by U.S. cities, counties, and states, that these modern building codes also include safeguards to protect the public from natural disasters such as hurricanes, snowstorms, tornadoes, wildland fires, and earthquakes. And whereas Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council to remind the public about the critical role of our community's largely unknown guardians of public safety, our local code officials, who assure us safe, efficient, and livable buildings. And whereas each year in observance of Building Safety Month, Americans are asked to consider the projects to improve building safety and sustainability at home and in the community, and to acknowledge the essential services provided to all of us by our local, state, and building code departments, our fire prevention bureaus, and federal agencies in protecting the lives of the property. Now I, therefore, Mark Stodola, the mayor of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim May 2017 as Building Safety Month here in the city of Little Rock, and urge all of the citizens of Little Rock to join me in this recognition. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and seal on this first day of May 2017. All of us know we sit here and listen to many, many developments that go on in our city. And it is true that our building code officials are the unknown heroes of making sure that the citizens who occupy these many, many buildings are as safe as we can possibly make them. So let me present this to our safety officials, Chief and Chuck Gibbons. Thank you very much for all that you do, and I certainly want to give you an opportunity to respond.
Mayor, I'd just like to thank the Vice Mayor and the Board of Directors for their support of our construction codes, and also the City Manager, Mr. Bruce Moore. And one person I'd like to also recognize is Tony Bazinski, who's leaving us here in about a month, and he's been a great supporter of the construction codes and our inspectors, and just like to thank him for all the years of support. And also like to thank the Chief Summers and Chief Gray, who's with me tonight. He's the Chief of the Fire Marshals and the inspectors that out in the field every day making inspections. Chief.
Thank you. I'd just like to recognize the board as well and thank everybody for giving us the resources, Bruce and Chief Summers, to do a magnificent job to keep the city safe.
Thank you.
Okay, we can now move on to our agenda, and there is a suggestion of a modification, the M1 resolution. Board members, if you would look at that, and is there a motion to add this to the consent agenda?
move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to add this to the consent agenda. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. It will be added. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the consent agenda items 1 through 11 and M1 for us, please.
The consent agenda consists of a motion to approve the minutes of the December 6th, 2016 and January 3rd, 2017 Little Rock City Board of Directors meetings and the December 13th, 2016 Little Rock City Board of Directors reconvene meeting. A resolution to set May 16th, 2017 as the date of public hearing on the petition to abandon a 20-foot wide access and utility easement located in the southern portion of Lot 204, Sandpiper Addition, in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, a resolution to set May 16, 2017 as the date of public hearing on a notice of appeal on the actions of the Little Rock Planning Commission in denying a requested plan zoning district titled Tract 75 Chenal Valley Longform PDR, located on the northwest corner of Champenola Drive and Rawling Road in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, a resolution authorizes the city manager to execute a third amendment to the Parking Citation Management Services Agreement awarded to Professional Account Management LLC, also known as Duncan Solutions, to extend the contract for one additional year, and for the purposes, a resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into agreement with Northrop Grumman in the amount of $295,805 for the purchase of an explosive ordnance disposal vehicle for the Little Rock Fire Department, and for other purposes, an ordinance to set title to property donated to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas by quitclaim deed to be used for neighborhood revitalization programs, and for the purposes, a resolution to accept title to properties donated to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas by quitclaim deed to be used for neighborhood revitalization programs, and for the purposes, a resolution authorizes the city manager to award a contract to JCI Construction Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $216,794.50 for the Heather Brae Glen Valley Drainage Improvement Project, and for other purposes, funding for the 2012 38-cent capital improvement sales tax and the 2013 limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution authorizes the city manager to award a contract to JCI Construction Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $753,146.40 for the Tanya Drive realignment and signal improvement project, and for the purposes, funding for the 2012 38-cent capital improvement sales tax and the 2013 limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with River City Hydraulic Company in the total amount of $708,000 for the purchase of 4 rear loader sanitation trucks for the Public Works Department, utilizing the Houston-Galveston Area Council Cooperative Purchasing Agreement, and for the purposes, a resolution to express the willingness of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to utilize Federal Aid Transportation Alternatives Program funds, and to authorize the mayor, city manager, and city clerk to execute any and all necessary agreements and documents for its administration, and for the purposes, a resolution authorizes the city manager to execute a contract with Windstream Services LLC in an amount not to exceed $268,585.80 for the purchase of session initiation protocol trunking system and related equipment and services and for other purposes. That concludes the consent agenda.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the passage of the consent agenda indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The consent agenda is passed. The next portion of our agenda provides for citizen communication, allowing 3 minutes for specific items which have not been previously brought to our attention or are not already on our agenda. We have no cards for citizen communication this evening, so we will now move on to the grouped items, items 12 through 18, and let me ask the city clerk for the first reading.
An ordinance to amend Chapter 8 of the revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to modify the boundaries of the fire district and for other purposes. An ordinance to amend Chapter 8 of the revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to provide for the adoption by reference of the 2017 National Electrical Code and for other purposes. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas and for the purposes. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes. An ordinance to authorize the city manager to dispense with the requirement of competitive bidding and enter into a sole source contract with Socrata Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $131,064 plus applicable taxes and fees for the purchase of the Socrata Open Performance Module implementation and for the purposes. First reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place on second reading.
Second.
There's a second. All in favor of the motion to place these ordinances on second reading indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Second reading, please.
An ordinance to amend Chapter 8 of the revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to modify the boundaries of the fire district. An ordinance to amend Chapter 8 of the revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to provide for the adoption by reference of the 2017 National Electrical Code. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to authorize the city manager to dispense with the requirement of competitive bidding and enter into a sole source contract with Socrata Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $131,064 plus applicable taxes and fees for the purchase of the Socrata Open Performance Module implementation. Second reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
Is there a second? All in favor of the motion to suspend the rules and place these ordinances on third and final reading indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Third and final reading, please.
An ordinance to amend Chapter 8 of the revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to modify the boundaries of the fire district. An ordinance to amend Chapter 8 of the revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to provide for the adoption by reference of the 2017 National Electrical Code. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the City of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to authorize the city manager to dispense with the requirement of competitive bidding and enter into a sole source contract with Socrata Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $131,064 plus applicable taxes and fees for the purchase of the Socrata Open Performance Module implementation. Third and final reading.
Okay, we've had all three readings. There don't seem to be any questions on any of these. All in favor of the passage of these ordinances indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The ordinances have passed. We can now move on to the individual items that we have on our agenda, and the first one is Resolution Number 19. Madam Clerk, if you would read that, please.
A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into contracts to provide summer academic enrichment and recreation programs approved by the Commission on Children, Youth, and Families for 2017 and for other purposes.
Okay, we had a reading of this resolution, and Director Adcock has a question or
Yes.
comment. Go ahead, Director Adcock.
Mr. Moore, I would like to have these locations and their areas read so that the people watching at home and the people here will know where these programs are located, please. And I would also like staff to let people know where they can contact them to ask questions about these programs.
They're there on the screen, Director Adcock, and board, Our House, Boys and Girls Club, Thrasher, ABC, Adolescent Center, Brandon House, the Knowledge Factory, Boys and Club, Mitchell, Centers for Youth and Family, Cradle to Prison, Placer County Youth Services, Boys and Girls Club, Pinnock, Life Skills for Youth, Songbird Multimedia, Moody Chapel A&Me Church, Sight Ministries, Boys and Girls Club, Whetstone. We also have 4 additional, Hearts of Passion, Everlasting, Crenshaw Aviation Academy, and Bridge to Success in Tanglewood. And if there's any questions about any of these programs, you can call 399-3420.
Okay, and when will these programs start, please?
Summer. June the 11th.
June the 11th. Okay, so people need to get their applications in soon. Thank you.
Mr. Moore,
Adoption of the resolution.
Mr. Moore, I know a lot of the people that are in the audience were here for our earlier meeting. Would you just briefly overview for our audience what these programs are designed to do?
Sure. Let me ask the Director of Community Programs, Dana Doucette, to come forward.
That's why I want them at least read, because people never know.
Thank you, Bruce, the mayor and the board. Thank you. What these programs are specifically for is that they are called summer academic enrichment and recreation programs. And so we recognize that in the summer, we wanted to make sure that students were not having the learning loss that sometimes happens during the summer, but we also want to make sure that they have some fun. And so these programs are specifically meant to be 50-50, meaning 50% of their time during the day will be spent on academic enrichment activities that are specifically to help them with that learning loss. It may be reading, it may be tutoring, it may be different activities in different subjects. But then they're also expected to have some recreation. So we have activities at the zoo, at the different parks that we have, and just different recreational activities so that they're also mixed in with some fun. So again, specifically this year, we have summer academic enrichment, which is 50%, and recreation, which is the other 50% of the program time.
And this starts in June?
It does. It goes from June until the last day of July, which is July 28th. I think that's the Friday.
Very good. An 8-week program then.
Yes.
Thank you. There may be some other questions, Ms. Doucette, so we've got a few questions. Director Hendricks, you're next, please.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Mr. Moore, I was reading the agenda, and it says that this program was just funded, and it was to be separate from all these other. How did this appear all of a sudden on my computer? And it's $50,000, and I want to know who's going to run that program, and is that person here?
Which program?
It's on your computer.
That-
It's on mine.
I think you're talking about the second one.
You think so?
I think so.
It's 20, isn't it?
Right, we're on 19.
Okay, well, my 20 is coming up.
Well, when we get to that, I'll recognize you, Director
Okay.
Hendricks. Director Wright, you're recognized, please.
Yes. Dana, what are the age groups for some of these programs? Are any of these to deal with our teenagers or so
No.
forth? I'm getting a lot of questions about what we're going to do with the age 14 up.
These programs are specifically for 6 to 15 because starting 16 to 21, they're invited into our summer jobs program. And so that's why these go from 6 to 15, and then summer jobs starts from 16 to 21.
So we don't have any type of programming that would address these youth that are teenagers other than summer employment.
Well, we do. We still have our year-round programs because our year-round programs are still available year-round. And so they are available in the summertime as well.
And are these a youth initiative programs?
The youth initiative programs, as well as we do have 12 to 17-year-old positive prevention programs as well. They're open year-round. The summertime actually is a good time to try to get into those programs as well because people move or they go on vacation, they do different things in the summertime, but those are definitely still available during the summertime as well.
That was going to be my next question. Are they full?
Not all of them, no. Some of them we're still actually in the contracting phase with because as you might remember, we had to rebid some of the programs. And so definitely some of those rebid programs are just now continuing to accept new clients.
So parents can contact your office
Definitely.
about getting their children enrolled or your teenagers.
Yes, and we are in the process of updating the website right now. Part of the challenge is just that we haven't finished contracting, and of course, we can't put it up there until the contracting is actually done. But if people want to find out where the nearest program is that we expect to be available, they can always email programreferral@littlerock.gov, and they can also call us at 399-3420.
And these are what we were calling in the past youth initiative projects or YIP sites for girls and boys?
They still are. So we have youth intervention programs and we also have positive prevention programs. Positive prevention programs were previously called neighborhood-based programs.
Okay, so for the listening audience, I see we have the press here. I got that question Monday. What are we offering for these teenagers? And these are year-round programs that are available, and they can contact your office to find out where they need to contact the program site.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then my next question, Mayor, was regarding some of the recommendations that we just heard from our citizenry about intervening with some of our young people that are maybe in these gangs. Are there any other programs that you all are looking at, Dana, for funding, like what the mentoring program that Uncle Willie talked about and so forth?
There is. In fact, we're in the process right now immediately. We've been working on since the Youth Master Plan and then definitely since the beginning of this year on what we call a community intervention program. Mm-hmm. And so we are probably by the end of this week, at the beginning of the next, at the latest, should be in a position to release that RFQ because we want to make sure that we have a true strategy for delivering the services. We don't want to just do it without any type of true strategy. And so the RFQ will allow for the strategy to be in place so that we can then utilize some of these people who have agreed to assist us with this project and actually put it into force.
So any of these people that we heard from tonight who were saying they have 501c3s, if they contact your office, they can get this information
Definitely.
on how they can engage?
And the best way to do it is to actually register as a bidder or as a vendor, if you will, on the website, so that when we send out the information, when the RFQ becomes available, they're notified. I would also encourage any 501c3 that's interested in this body of work to contact our office, because in addition to what the procurement office sends out, we also send out a postcard to anyone that's registered with us, just to make sure that they know that it's available. We also have pre-bidders workshops to help them understand and be able to ask any questions that they may have about what we're trying to accomplish. So we do all of those things to make sure that they have a great understanding of the work. And as you know, that's important because everyone now is required to follow under the guidelines of the Youth Master Plan. And there are some accountability things more than anything that they will need to be able to rise to, and that's the reporting, that's the information, so that at the end of the Youth Master Plan, I'm able to come back to the board and explain exactly what we did, why we did it, how we did it, and what we were able to accomplish.
Okay, and if they come to these workshops, they can learn what they have to do and get assistance in coming into compliance or coming up to compliance. Is that
Exactly.
correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So, and the fact that they are a 501c3, they have gone through a process to get that 501c3, so they know that there is a process to dealing with any type of government entity and applying for funds.
Yes.
So we should not have any misunderstandings that we are a government entity and you have to do things a certain way.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Campiris, you're recognized, please.
As you try to compile your statistics for what we do, I was taken by our earlier discussion about where we spend the $5.5 million. And I can obviously tell you the location of these facilities, but can you give us, at the end of this, some idea who we're serving in these programs and where they're coming from? Because I think that's an important thing as we look at where we spend our money. I think that probably they're coming from the area that the people were talking about tonight, but we need to be able to say that, and it's a statistic that we ought to be able to get as we look at the young people that go into these programs.
And Director Campiris, that's a very good point, and I know we've been already overlaying that information. Mr. Moore, do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
We
to show-
do. In fact, I called Melissa yesterday morning after our meeting on Sunday, and I said, let's put a map together that shows where these PIT programs are funded and where we're having our issues. And we're still working on it, but as you can see, our PIT programs are right here, exactly where very closely resembling the map that the chief was showing about where our hotspots are. And I think it's good that we're going to get that out. That's going to be one of our portals, because that's exactly, I think, Director Campiris, exactly what we're doing. We're placing our resources in the areas that they mainly talked about on Sunday.
Well, I didn't know you were doing that, but that was my feeling of what we were doing based on where I know where these places are and what we showed on Sunday. And I'm glad that you're getting that information, because we're spending $5.5 million a year. And if we know there's a hotspot and we know that programs need to be directed to those hotspots, we need to know that we're doing it. And if we are, then the next step is we need to know if they're effective. And that's the other thing that we need to do. We need to be able to verify that what we're doing with this money is efficiently spending the money, like Doris has been saying for a number of years. And so I appreciate you having the map. I'm sorry I stole your thunder, but as I was looking at it, that seemed like the issue that we really need to be addressing. Is the money being spent where the problem is? If it is, then the next thing on you is, are we doing it efficiently, and is it result oriented? So thank you.
Director Peck, you're recognized, please.
We're on the same wavelength. That was my question. So thank you. Thanks, Bruce.
Director Hendricks?
Usually I come kind of different. I've been on this board, and I could tell you, as a board member, where all the shooting is, where the money is going. I wouldn't have to ask you that. I know that. And I just wanted to share that with you. Even though my sidekick, apparently he didn't know. But I will know where the money is being spent. Okay?
Actually,
That's it.
I did know. I just wanted to verify it, and thank you for having the map. So thank you for doing the right thing.
Director Adcock, you're recognized, please.
Dana or Bruce, do we follow these kids for so many years after they're out of our programs?
We have not yet, but we're in the process of doing that through, we're actually in a process of talking with a lot of our past YIP coordinators, finding out where their students are and what has happened to them. We started that about a year and a half ago when we had our success stories. We've since uncovered a lot of them. One great thing is that a great many of them actually work for the city, so we were really proud of that. We have firefighters and police officers and people that work in various offices in the city. Michael Sanders, our community resources manager, is also another person that has gone through our programs that shows up in the city. So we are in the process of trying to figure out how we can do that and how the data would allow us to do, the data collection would allow us to do that within privacy laws.
I know we've been doing this 20 years, and we keep hearing that these young people that are some of the problems today have been in those neighborhoods and those communities all these years. So I was wondering how many of them had been into our programs, and if we did trace them after so many years to find out what they're doing, or if whenever the program's over with, they're just gone out of our sight.
We are working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Dana, are you, just out of curiosity, with these programs, both the year-round programs, all of your programs, are you doing any kind of a family asset assessment of the family, the condition upon which these children are living?
Yes and no. It's not, the individual programs do that as part of their files because that's how they're able to determine if this is a true YIP kid or if this is really a positive prevention kid and what that looks like. So the individual programs do that. We as a department have not yet collected that information, but that's also part of the management information system work that we're trying to look at as we start looking at the data that's
Well,
required.
And I think it's very important, and I don't mean it as in terms of name inventory, but we have so many wraparound services out here, so many organizations willing to provide for those kinds of deficits that we see in a family situation, whether it be unemployment, whether it be more education or lack of education. I really think it'd be good if we could get that information and begin to inventory that so we can figure out how to match up these organizations that we know are out here that want to provide services. You know, trying to match the right people with the right organization is, I think, a great challenge that we need to try and attack.
Yes, sir.
Director Hines, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. Dana, thanks again for bringing this to us. Dean, to go back to what you're talking about, the big push with our youth master plan, which we've been implementing over the last year, is a focus on evidence-based programming, and we've got software to capture that data, and that's one of the outcomes that we'll start seeing is more data for us to look at once the programs are completed each year and we go through a review cycle. There's a CYF, and I sit on it, has a review committee that reviews each one of the programs to make sure that they're following their contracts, and if any of them are having problems, we make adjustments. We get them extra training and help if they need it. So that's one of the great things. And then earlier we were a little maligned for not having funded this type program, but I want everybody to recall that we took the program before the sales tax from $2.5 million after the sales tax to $5.5 million. So we more than doubled our funding of that program with the sales tax. So to say that we're not putting that money to work in our communities to be proactive and try to prevent some of these kids from getting into the thug and drug life is a little short-sighted. So I appreciate all your hard work, Dana, and just wanted to set the record straight that we are doing something, and it is a community effort. And it, like we said Sunday, it's a three-pronged effect. It's the city doing work through our PIT funding, the police department, and the community as a whole. And I think one of the great things I saw tonight is a lot of folks from our community that have the street cred you were talking about, Director Wright, to get out there, and hopefully we can partner with them to help us make those penetrations and make some differences in some young folks' lives. Thank you.
Director, excuse me, Director Hendricks, you're recognized.
Not until you get to 20. I just want to make sure you didn't overlook me. Are you on 20?
No, we're not there yet.
Okay, because you will do that if I don't watch you. Yeah.
Well, I'll call on you even if you don't punch your light on. Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm just getting at the end of this. I was summoned by some of the folks who spoke on that last issue. And Mayor, listening you talk about the wraparound services, there needs to be an entity. National League of Cities suggests that any kind of funding that any municipality engages in, you got to have an intermediary that's a part of that to eliminate the politics, the politicizing of their funding. And I think that that's an important part. You need to have somebody to coordinate the wraparound services. You need to have an intermediary, and National League of Cities would tell you that. And in terms of evaluations, you also need to have some kind of independent entity. I don't know how we're using to evaluate programs and the success of programs. But one of the things, when we first started PIT, it was in I think it was the premises for the Future Little Rock sales tax in 1993. And when the funding came in, we had a dollar for dollar, public safety, police, and prevention. And that brought us up to about $3 million. And in 2008, I think during a recession, that was reduced by $500,000. And we've never brought it back up to that $300,000 initial mark. And we came up with the $3 million based on what it would cost us to hire 135 new police officers over a 3-year period, 45 officers each year, and that equated to $3 million a year. And that's where we didn't just arbitrarily pull this $3 million out of the air. We didn't just say, well, we need $3 million because we have 44,000 kids. We based that on what it would cost the city to hire 135 new police officers, and we cut PIT by $500,000 in 2008 during the recession in 2008. We've never brought it back up to that $3 million to match the $3 million we brought back after 2011. So the $2.5 million and $3 million, yeah, we're at $5.5 million. But if we were base it on what we were talking about operating on the full level, it'd be $6 million right now. And with respect to the programs that get the funding, in 1994, we were not selective in terms who got the funding. We didn't matter. It didn't matter to us if it was Boys and Girls Clubs or Watershed. And Brother Sanford Tollett, who operated programs out at Camp Pfeiffer, can attest to this. But as things got quiet and settled down, we became selective in terms of who got the funding and who went through this rigorous evaluation that we're talking about. And I would suggest that selective evaluation could lead to selective salvation. And after 1994, we got to about 1995 or 1996, we brought the preeminent expert on youth development, Karen Pittman, down to spend about a week and a half with us. And what that equated to, Mayor, we moved from prevention mindset to a youth development mindset. Because problem-free does not necessarily mean fully prepared. So we moved away from just preventing things from happening to young people to encouraging us to make things happen for them and to them. And simply put, if Dean asked me, if I asked Dean, would you hire Irma for a job? And Dean, you say, Ken, tell me something about Irma. Well, Dean, she's not in the gang. She's not a teenage parent. She's not on drugs. Would you hire her? Chances are you're going to say, no, Ken. Why not, Dean? Because you haven't told me one single thing she can do. You told me everything you prevented from happening to her. That was the impetus for us going to youth development. The youth development framework has been able to make us go to a whole nother level. One of the things we failed to do, you think about it, $6 million a year. We failed to use that as leverage for additional funding, whether it's from the feds, whether it's from additional foundation, whether it's from other entities, to take that, maybe take that $6 million a year to $9 million a year, however much we want to utilize it, how much we want to attract or bring into our coffers. That's one of the things we haven't done. We haven't used this funding, these public sector funding, to attract private sector funding. And that's one of the ways we can enhance our programming. That's one of the ways we can coordinate our wraparound services so we're not duplicating services and make this a little bit more effective and a little bit more efficient than we're doing right now. That's not to suggest not to disparage any of the programs right now, but we've certainly seen a devolution of how we fund these programs, who we fund these programs, and the people that, like a lot of those people in the audience before, just a minute ago, talked about, some of them have gone through these programs. Some of them had family members go through these programs. And some of those people were part of our street-based crisis intervention team, Mayor, that we would have them out in the community to negotiate some of these conflicts so that they didn't evolve into shootings or acts of violence. The police can't go out there and arrest somebody because they're talking about hurting each other, or they're thinking about hurting each other. They can only get engaged with them after they commit a crime. But one of the things you were here, and the chief told us this last week, and we've all mentioned this, Mayor, you said on the interview a couple of weeks ago, we need cooperation in order for us to solve these crimes. And if we don't have those relationships, how do we expect any kind of cooperation? It's not going to happen. So we can't simplify this and put icing on the cake and say, well, this is the way we're going to do it. This is how we're going to address it. This is not. It's a little bit more complex than that. And it takes a little bit more willpower. It takes a little bit more thinking, a little bit more interest and focus on our public policies. Those people a minute ago kept talking about throwing dollars. That's not the issue. To me, we have to have supportive policies that's going to help enhance what we're doing in the community on a number of different levels. And Dana, I thank you and appreciate everything you're doing. Michael, thank you. Dwight, Barbara, for all that you're doing. Because I know it's difficult work. I know the people that you're funding engage this work. It's difficult work. And hopefully we'll be able to take the conversation from tonight, take the conversations that we have among ourselves, and figure out a way to improve what we're doing, enhance what we're doing, and figure out a way to take the funding that we're putting in the community, in these programs, to attract other sources of funding. I don't think that's too difficult. So Dana, thank you. Thank you guys for listening to me. That's all I have to say, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Richardson. All right, that concludes the comments on the Resolution 19. All in favor of the passage of the resolution indicate by saying aye. Opposed, say nay.
I had a motion, I don't know who had a second. Well, I had a motion, but I didn't have a second.
All right, very good. We can now move on to resolution number 20, and let me ask for the reading.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into agreement with Junior Achievement in Arkansas in an amount not to exceed $50,000 to provide summer youth employment opportunity related services and for other purposes.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I'm concerned that, as I said, this was on my computer, and it seems that this program just come up after everything else. Is that person here who's going to run this program?
No, he's not here.
Who is it?
It's Chad Kaufman of Junior Achievement of Arkansas. He's the president.
Is he black or white?
He's Caucasian, yes.
And what's his experience? What has he done?
He's worked with Junior Achievement. Junior Achievement has worked with us for probably the past 3 to 4 years on this actual project. And so he comes with a history of knowledge of exactly kind of what we're trying to accomplish. This particular work deals with the training. As you might remember, we have a week of training of the students before they actually go out to the work sites. And this is primarily that training, making sure that they receive all of the information that they need to be successful once they go on the job site.
What was he doing, Dana, before you got his program?
He's always been, I do know a little bit about Chad. He's always been involved in youth development type work and nonprofit work. Most of his background is in the nonprofit area.
And of the $50,000, you think that will he be doing, or what do you think he can come up with that kind of money in such a short period of time?
Well, again, since he's actually had this information for a long time and been working with us for the past 4 years in this, he already had a framework and idea, so he's not starting from zero. He actually has a great idea of what to do and how to pull it together. The week of training isn't until June 5th, so we have some time. It's not just tomorrow that we have to do it. And then we also have an agenda that we work from every year in terms of training the students. So there's also a basic framework for him to work from as far as the agenda goes. It's not like he's starting from scratch. And then also this whole year, we've also been doing our work as a department, because a lot of that work, a lot of the summer youth employment work actually exists within our department. So he's more or less actually assisting us with the work that we already do, as opposed to he's someone new off the street that doesn't know anything, that's
he's
trying to
with you
come up
right
with
now?
something. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let me know where he's going to be. I want to keep up with that, okay?
Sure.
Director Hines, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. Director Hendricks, Junior Achievement's been around for as long as I can remember, 15 or 20 years. I work mainly with volunteers in our public schools, teaching basic economic principles and free enterprise. So, yes.
That.
Pardon?
He's working for you in the evening time? Is that what you're saying?
No. They have a complete organization that's works within our public school system.
Okay.
On a volunteer basis. They don't basically charge the schools. They go in with volunteers and stuff and work within our school system to teach basic economics principles and free enterprise.
And this will be his first year doing this? with us?
No, he's done this in, I think,
At least 4 years.
the last 3 to
Not
4
in
years.
this capacity?
In this
Yes,
capacity.
in this capacity.
Okay, because I was understanding that he's going to operate this program.
No, he's done this work for the past 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
I'd say at
Well,
least.
Dana, he has a staff, does he not?
Yes, he does have a
I
staff.
mean, this is
yes.
not a one-shot
Oh, no.
deal or a one-horse
Correct.
pony. It's,
Okay, Dana, the way it's written up to me, and my understanding is this is his first time coming on. I'm telling you what I'm reading, because I had
Okay.
asked some staff about this program. They didn't even know what I was talking about,
Okay,
okay?
yes,
That's it.
okay.
Just I don't like games.
did you have anything else, Director Hines?
Move for the adoption of the resolution, Mayor, if nobody else got any comments.
Is there a second? One thing I'll just add, this past weekend, Junior Achievement sponsored what we called Spark Tank, which was kind of a takeoff on what we know as Shark Tank. And we had several people in high school, business organizations that came from all of our public schools who presented here their particular things that they were creating and selling, and it was quite impressive. It was widely diversified in terms of race. Some of the presentations would make all of us very proud of the kind of education they were getting in our schools. And I think there's probably something on the website. I know I put something in my newsletter about it, so I just would encourage you to look at that. I think everybody would be very excited to see what some of the wonderful creative ideas people were coming up with. Okay, there's been a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The resolution is passed. Thank you, Dana. We can now move on to ordinance number 21. And let me ask for the first reading of the ordinance.
An ordinance to authorize the issuance of taxable industrial development revenue bonds under the authority of Act Number 9 of 1960 as amended, and the municipalities and counties industrial development revenue bond law as amended to secure and develop industry within the city, to authorize execution and delivery of a bond purchase agreement providing for the sale of the bonds, to authorize the execution and delivery of a mortgage security agreement and fixture filing securing the bonds, to authorize execution and delivery of a lease agreement by and between the City of Little Rock, Arkansas as lessor and Martial Arts Services Incorporated as lessee, to authorize and approve execution and delivery of a sublease agreement by and between the lessor and ATA International Incorporated as sublessee, to authorize execution and delivery of an agreement for payments in lieu of taxes, to authorize execution and delivery of other documents related to the issuance of the bonds, and to prescribe other matters in relation thereto, to declare an emergency and for the purposes. First reading.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and place this on second reading. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Second reading, please.
An ordinance to authorize the issuance of taxable industrial development revenue bonds under the authority of Act Number 9 of 1960 as amended, and the municipalities and counties industrial development revenue bond law as amended, to secure and develop industry within the city, to authorize execution and delivery of a bond purchase agreement providing for the sale of the bonds, to authorize the execution and delivery of a mortgage security agreement and fixture filing securing the bonds, to authorize execution and delivery of a lease agreement by and between the City of Little Rock, Arkansas as lessor and Martial Arts Services Incorporated as lessee, to authorize and approve execution and delivery of a sublease agreement by and between the lessor and ATA International Incorporated as sublessee, to authorize execution and delivery of an agreement for payments in lieu of taxes, to authorize the execution and delivery of other documents related to the issuance of the bonds, and to prescribe other matters in relation thereto, to declare an emergency. Second reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and place this ordinance on third and final reading. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Third and final reading, please.
An ordinance to authorize the issuance of taxable industrial development revenue bonds under the authority of Act Number 9 of 1960 as amended, and the municipalities and counties industrial development revenue bond law as amended, to secure and develop industry within the city, to authorize execution and delivery of a bond purchase agreement providing for the sale of the bonds, to authorize the execution and delivery of a mortgage security agreement and fixture filing securing the bonds, to authorize execution and delivery of a lease agreement by and between the City of Little Rock, Arkansas as lessor and Martial Arts Services Incorporated as lessee, to authorize and approve execution and delivery of a sublease agreement by and between the lessor and ATA International Incorporated as sublessee, to authorize execution and delivery of an agreement for payments in lieu of taxes, to authorize execution and delivery of other documents related to the issuance of the bonds, and to prescribe other matters in relation thereto, to declare an emergency. Third and final reading.
Are there any questions?
Mayor, you've got to open the public hearing.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and open up that public hearing. Any questions? Any questions? All right, hearing none, let me go ahead and close the public hearing. And ask for a vote. All in favor of the ordinance indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, saying,
Roll call, please.
all those opposed say nay. There are no nays.
You have a present.
The ordinance is passed. Now there is a request for a roll call. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the roll.
Director Campuris,
Yes.
Director Fortson,
Aye.
Director Adcock,
Yes.
Director Hendricks,
Present.
Director Richardson,
Yes.
Director Peck,
Yes.
Director Hines,
Yes.
Director Wright,
Yes.
Director Wyrick,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Webb.
Yes.
Director Hendricks, would you like to change your vote?
Present. Aye. Aye.
Change it to
Well,
aye.
you said present and then you said aye. Which one do you wish?
She's got it. She hear me.
Well, the chair would like to understand, Madam Clerk, what she's,
Aye, aye, aye.
you're voting for it.
Aye.
All right. So, roll call, 11 ayes, no nays.
10.
Excuse me, 10.
You can't get in the
10.
party, man.
I can't vote.
Yeah, no, you can't get in the party.
Only if there's a tie.
Me instead of taking the things down there.
Trying to get in the party.
Yeah, I know they are. All right, very good. And on the emergency clause, all in favor of the emergency clause indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The emergency clause is also passed. Okay, we can now move on to item 22. And let me ask for the reading of the resolution, please.
A resolution to rescind the Little Rock Planning Commission's action in denying a conditional use permit to allow a wastewater treatment plant on the property located at 25,616 Highway 10 and for other purposes.
Thank you. Okay, we've had a reading of the resolution. This was deferred previously, initially in September of last year, and has moved forward to tonight. I do have several cards on this matter. Let me go ahead and call on the applicant for a presentation. Mr. Kaplan, welcome.
You need to open the public hearing.
Director, just a minute, please, Mr. Kaplan. Director Campuris?
Yeah, that's fine. Sometime I'd like to have Tony give us his synopsis of this.
Well, why don't we go ahead and take care of that first
That's
then?
fine.
And then I'll call on you, Mr. Kaplan.
That's fine.
Mayor, you need to formally open the public hearing.
All right, we'll go ahead and open this up as a public hearing as well. It's going to, thank you.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, item 22 is before you on appeal. As the resolution indicated, it's to rescind the Planning Commission's action in denying a conditional use permit for a wastewater treatment plant. The property in question is located in the extraterritorial area, approximately 2 to 2.5 miles outside the city limits. The address is 25,616 Highway 10. And the Planning Commission held its public hearing in July of last year. There was a very lengthy discussion and hearing. After hearing both sides, the Planning Commission vote was 1 aye and 9 noes, thus denying the application. It's a conditional use permit for placement of this wastewater treatment plant to ultimately serve a future development, which is a subdivision of approximately 110 lots. Staff at the Planning Commission recommended denial of the conditional use permit. We raised issues with compatibility, potential negative impacts on surrounding properties, possible long-term health, safety, and welfare issues. The Planning Commission also expressed concern about possible enforcement problems and, again, potential impacts on the environment. And there was quite a bit of opposition at the Planning Commission hearing. The opposition raised concerns about another discharge into the Nolan Creek, type of growth that's compatible or not compatible with the surrounding area, the long-term effect of a number of treatment plants on the area, and also they raised concerns about enforcement and maintenance of the plant.
Okay, Are there questions for Tony? Director Wright, yes, please, you're recognized.
Well, I guess maybe my question's for the city attorney. I was listening to what Mr. Brzezinski was saying about the issues and the concerns that staff had. But Mr. Carpenter, before us is a zoning issue, is that correct? Are we allowed to consider, health and safety issues as it relates to this particular project?
Conditional use permits allow you to consider the impact on the surrounding area.
Okay.
So in that sense, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other, Director Campuris, go ahead, please.
What is this zoned right now?
Director Campuris, it's currently zoned, well, it's an expired planned commercial development. That planned development was approved in 2007. As you know, a planned development has a life of 3 years. You can get an additional extension, but again, it's expired. And the underlying zoning is R2 single family.
Thank you.
Director Fortson, you're recognized, please.
Tony, how large, I thought I found it right, but I lost it. How large is the overall development contemplated to be in the area?
Director Fortson, the write-up indicates approximately 36 or 37 acres.
Okay, I may have some other questions for you later, but that's all.
All right, thank you, Tony. We can now go ahead and hear from the various parties that wish to speak on this. Mr. Kaplan, for the applicant.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the board. I think I can address all of the issues.
Could you pull that microphone down
Sure.
just a bit? Thank you.
I think I can address all of the issues mentioned by Mr. Brzezinski. But to begin with, I need to go back to 2002, when there was a hearing before the Planning Commission with regard to this zoning and all of the other zoning in the ETJ extraterritorial jurisdiction. Several parcels were before, dozens of parcels were before the Planning Commission at that time. The parcel involved here, as Mr. Brzezinski has just said, is R2. It was R2 then, it's R2 now. In the interim, there was a planned commercial development, but that has expired. Some areas in this northwest area were zoned agricultural because the people who owned that property had animals on that property. Some of the areas in southwest Little Rock had no zoning at all because there was such a volume of objections to zoning in that area. So there's still no zoning in that section of the ETJ. Now, Mr. Ferguson has submitted a subdivision development which conforms in every respect to the R2 zoning. Now, how can this board deny this conditional use permit on the basis of any zoning with regard to anything involved in the zoning? That's the very definition of arbitrary and capricious because he has complied with everything regarding R2 zoning. Now, the staff complains that approval of this CUP for the WWTP will be the first step in allowing the subdivision to totally ignore the city's existing zoning. This subdivision, as I said before, is already R2, and the CUP issue cannot be conflated with the R2 zoning already allowed. To say, as the staff does, that this is a classic case of urban sprawl, it's really absurd. They suggest it would be okay to have this closer to the city limits. But if it's near the edge of the ETJ, then somehow it's inappropriate. But it's already zoned. And if it's already zoned for this kind of development, it doesn't make any difference whether it is a half mile away or 2 miles away. The sellers of this property held the property as R2, and my client bought it as R2. And you can't tell him now, at least I don't believe you can tell him now, that the project complies with R2, but he can't develop it as R2 and because it's urban sprawl. And that's the only thing that this write-up says about any problem with the subdivision. It's urban sprawl. It's 3.5 minutes from Walmart, less time than other properties that are within the city limits, at the western edge of the city limits. It's 4 minutes from the Bank of Ozarks' proposed development, and I'm sure that'll happen, at the ranch, which will create dozens and dozens of new jobs and a demand for nearby housing. And this would be housing where the trips would be going west at evening and coming east in the morning, but not past the ranch, not into the area of high traffic development east of the ranch. Now, why wouldn't we want a housing stock closer to the city limits where the city's going to grow anywhere? Why would we want to have housing stock in Lonoke County, in Benton County, in Bryant, in Cabot? We want housing stock that's close to this city, and people who are working in the city have a chance to live at least close to the city. Now, after several adverse comments by area residents complaining about a discharge at the Lockridge Estate subdivision located in Lawson Road, and this was in September of 2005. At that time, the ADEQ permitted first, and then it came to the city board, the commission, and then the city board. And after several adverse comments by area residents, this is, quote, what Commissioner Bill Rector at the time said. Quote, "The issues raised are technical issues the commission is in no position to answer. If the ADEQ felt that the site was suitable for development, the commission must trust their judgment," close quote. And you can substitute city board for commission, because this board has no more expertise with regard to those things that the ADEQ deals with than the commission and Mr. Rector's position at the time, and still is valid. And to this day, Lockridge still does not have a CUP, and it has had periodic renewals of their permit. And it's still operating, and the subdivision is still filling out. And if Lockridge can operate under these conditions, surely Mountain Valley ought to be able to. Now, I understand that the staff is now claiming that they've changed their view about how the law with regard to WWTPs, wastewater treatment plants, ought to be considered. That is, whether it should be for single housing units or for multiple family housing units. But their understanding really doesn't match the ADEQ and the Health Department, because those agencies require permitting of any device that discharges to ground as opposed to below ground, whether it be a WWTP, which accepts discharge from a single home or a single office building or a single commercial structure, or for an entire subdivision. Lockridge was an entire subdivision. Mountain Valley is an entire subdivision. It's in the same position. It doesn't even have a CUP. Also, the CUP, of course, covers all kinds of conditional uses, not only WWTPs. And the city has not required CUPs for many, many conditional uses in the ETJ, I'll get it out in a minute. And the city is not enforcing the full Chapter 36 zoning regulations in the ETJ, nor could it afford to, nor would you want the city to spend money in the county, in the ETJ, to enforce all of Chapter 26 zoning regulations. Now, the staff review has nothing to say about the kinds of typical CUP reviews that exist. Do they say that it's going to be too noisy? Do they say it's going to be too large? Do they say it's going to be too tall, that the lighting is inappropriate, that it'll bother adjacent owners because of the lighting or the noise? No. None of those things are applicable here. These are the typical findings you find by staff in CUPs, but which don't exist here and are not in the CUP review. Now, I've got some photos, and Scott will put those up in a minute. This is the area right behind the truck. Now, this photo are some of the 63 WWTPs which exist already in the county. These are, and you can see, look at the left side, you see Alotian. Alotian discharges into Nowlin Creek now, and there's never been a problem with any of that discharge. And I need to tell you that we have already contracted with the same operator who operates Alotian and other WWTPs in the area, and he will be our operator, and he is a gifted individual who has had no problems with those WWTPs which he operates. Now, let's get to the next one. This is from the Department of Health, and the Department of Health, if you, unfortunately, you won't be able to read the whole thing, but I can tell you that the Department of Health okayed this. There's not a problem with the Department of Health. The plans and specifications for the above contained projects, that's one, this one. And then one, the engineering section relied upon the statements and representatives made in the engineer's report, plans and specifications. In case any statement or representation is found to be incorrect, the appeal may be, the approval may be revoked. But they approved the project. Now the next one. And the next one is a series of emails, the one that's highlighted from the ADEQ to John Matrailer, an engineer, on approval letter from the from the Department of Health is the only item that needs to be submitted at this time. It's required before we can issue a construction permit. After we receive this, the earliest permits could be issued would be the first month following. Well, Doug Ford is going to be here to discuss with you and to explain to you all of his dealings with ADEQ, and I'm confident that you will be totally satisfied that the ADEQ is satisfied with regard to this WTP. Next one. Right behind the truck is the area where the WWTP will be located, and as you can see, it's heavily wooded. And the next one. This shows the overall area where the WWTP will be located. Next. This shows the nearest residences. The southern part, it's 585 feet or so, 750 feet to the north on the other side of Nowlin Creek. So nobody's going to be close to this WWTP. And the next one? The next one is in relationship to our proposed treatment package is Alotian and Waterview, which is another WWTP, doesn't discharge into Nowlin Creek, but does discharge into the Little Maumelle. Next one. This is just what the WWTP will look like. It will, but you won't be able to see it. This one we showed to you because it is so close to a residential development. And many of these are in close proximity to residential developments. Next. it shows Nowlin. It shows the future residential development of approximately 39 acres, and you can see off to the right the CUP application area way over on the right where it will be, and it will be totally buffered. That's another thing. Nobody's complaining about the buffering here, either because it is totally surrounded by mature growth, and it will not be a problem. Next, if there is a next. Okay, and this is just, again, an aerial view of the area. And all of these will be available, and Mr. Ford can discuss that with you. Well, the only comment, the negative comment, directly related to the CUP with regard to this WWTP by the staff is that it, quote, has concerns that the long-term public health, safety, and welfare may not be protected, close quote. And they say this after they did have a July 2016 meeting with ADEQ. There's no identification of what those alleged concerns are. So I FOIA'd both the city and the ADEQ. I have the first two questions that I asked Mr. Buzinski with regard to this project were with regard to WWTPs in Pulaski County that operate either with or without a CUP. There are two separate, one question was with, one question was without. Has the city been informed at any time whether there has been a problem with any WWTP that has affected the public health, safety, and welfare? His answer was no to both of these. The third question was with regard to the meeting with the city, between the city staff and Mr. Moore and ADEQ. I asked what the date was and to supply notes concerning the meeting. He did not have the exact date, and he told me that those who met with ADEQ were Donna James, Dana Carney, Bruce Moore, and himself, but he supplied no notes. There is no support for the proposition that there ought to be a concern, at least no notes in their records, which demonstrate any kind of concern. So I also sent an FOIA to ADEQ asking for any notes, and I didn't get any notes from them either about anything that went on at the meeting. So where does the concern come from that they have long-term? If there's a concern, it's the ADEQ which monitors, not the city. Once it's over here, it's gone. You're not going to see this again because it'll be before the ADEQ in the Department of Health. Now, this will also be in an improvement district. Some of the people who spoke before the Planning Commission were concerned, well, some of these POAs, they really don't take good care of any issues which might come up. This will be in a municipal improvement district. It will have commissioners. It will have the right to assess. It will have the right to foreclose on properties if the assessments aren't paid. And the work has already begun on the improvement district. It hasn't gone any real distance because it won't go until it gets the permit by the ADEQ. Now, once it gets the permit, it will need to have an improvement district, and it will. So there isn't any concern with taking care of this WWTP into the future. There will be less phosphorus coming out of this treatment plant than comes off of pasture land already, which has fertilizer on it and which has animal waste on it. So the water discharge will be cleaner than water running off of adjacent fields into the creek. The ADEQ requires monthly reports on the operations. The plant is a 30,000 gallon plant, not 40,000. The ADEQ measures all of the water quality components. The ADEQ has said that it will restrict the flow coming out of the WTP in the summer when the flow on Nowlin Creek goes down. So it's adjusted for what the flow on the creek is. Now, I think that where we are is that this isn't within this city's expertise. It isn't within any of the code people you have. It isn't with anybody on this commission, on this board of directors. At least I don't believe, based on your past experiences for each of you, that any of you has that kind of experience. So what I would suggest is that the sensible thing to do is to say, okay, we'll approve this CUP on the condition that the developer comes back with a permit from the ADEQ. The ADEQ is the agency determined by the state to have jurisdiction over discharges onto land from treatment plants like this. If we can't get a permit, that means it's not appropriate. I mean, I think we're going to get a permit, but if it doesn't get permitted, then it's not appropriate, and there's no anxiety about it. Nobody needs to worry about it. But if it does get permitted, and you have issued conditionally the CUP, and we come back and we can show you the permit, then this project ought to go forward. He bought the property on the condition that he can put a subdivision there. With regard to the CUP, there is nothing to support the proposition that it endangers in the long term the public health, safety, and welfare. So it's perfectly appropriate for you to say, all right, we ought to defer to that agency which knows the most about this, which will on a regular basis require reports, monthly reports, which we will monitor. We'll go out there and look. Nobody from the city is going to go out there and look at any time. And you don't want to spend money in this EJP to do anything with regard to Chapter 36. Now, Mr. Ford is here, and he can explain the process before, what happens before the ADEQ, and what has happened already with regard to this, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Mr. Ford, you're recognized, please.
Mayor and Board of Directors, I'm Doug Ford. I practice environmental engineering in Little Rock and have practiced for 25 years or more. And I'm just going to briefly explain the process of obtaining a NPDES permit for the discharge of wastewater, treated wastewater. The NPDES permit is part of the Clean Water Act, and ADEQ has to follow the requirements of the Federal Clean Water Act to issue those permits. So the process goes, you make an application. We made application for this treatment plant, submitted it to ADEQ. They reviewed the application, deemed it to be complete, and then the process begins where they notice the public. They make notice to the public and say that a permit has been applied for to the ADEQ. The next step is you submit plans and specifications to the health department for their review. They review those plans and specifications and determine if the treatment plant meets the requirements of the health department. In this case, it did. So the next step is ADQ takes that information and prepares a draft permit for the discharge of treated wastewater. At that point, when the draft becomes final, they issue another advertisement for public comment on the draft permit. And that's where we are now. They submitted, or they advertised for public comment, and that public comment period is 30 days. And after the 30-day public comment period, the draft can go for final. So that's, the draft is still in, the permit is still in draft form. But I think some important things that I need to tell the board about the permit process is that this is not a regulation that ADQ came up with and reviews. This is a federal regulations, Clean Water Act. It's got teeth. Section 208 of the Federal Clean Water Act is the water quality part of that, and ADQ reviews that extensively when they're reviewing a permit. So when you submit an application for a permit, you typically describe what kind of wastewater you're going to be discharging. In this case, it's residential wastewater, and you describe where you're going to be discharging. In this case, is Nowlin Creek. Nowlin Creek is a small creek in western Pulaski County. So ADQ takes that information and they model the type of discharge you're going to have into the type of stream, and they determine limits based on water quality standards. Water quality standards set by the federal government and adopted by ADQ. In this case, ADQ said, well, we can issue a permit, a draft permit for this facility based on the flow in Nowlin Creek, and that the permit limits will vary depending on the flow in the creek. So the permit will look something like, for the months of May through October, there will be lower permit limits because the months of May through October, there's less flow in that creek. And for the months of November through April, where there's a little bit more rainfall and more flow in the creek, the permit limits will be slightly higher. All of these things are part of the Water Quality Management Plan, Section 208. ADQ doesn't overlook those things. They're very particular about those requirements. So in this case, they've modeled this, they've decided on some limits for this plant, and have issued a draft permit. This treatment plant that is proposed and gone through the permitting process is an activated sludge extended aeration treatment plant. It's nothing new. These plants are tried and true. They've been around for generations, decades. They operate very successfully with proper operation. The proposed treatment plant meets the requirements of ADQ and their water quality plan. I think that's it.
Are there any, Director Wright, did you have a question?
Yes, I was going to ask Mr. Carpenter. I heard Mr. Kaplan say that why do we not approve this conditional upon AEDQ or DEQ granting a permit? Can we do that?
Director Wright, there's a standoff. And that standoff is ADEQ won't grant a permit until the city has approved the zoning and all things that go with it, which would be the conditional use permit. The city will not grant the conditional use permit until ADQ has granted the permit for the package plant. And so it's a Mexican standoff. One of the Director Hines has asked me to look into language about changing the effective date of the resolution, and I have presented him some language that has been presented to the parties that tries to accomplish that. Now, I was not aware when I drafted it about the improvement district, and I take it the improvement district is actually going to get the permit. Okay.
The improvement district doesn't get the permit. The permit is issued to the applicant, and you can see that that's the Mountain Valley. But the improvement district, when it is formed, will then issue assessments to everybody in the improvement district, will elect 3 commissioners who will then operate the improvement district and will have jurisdiction and control over all of that. So if there is ever a problem, they're the ones who take care of it.
Okay, well, back to my question. I understand the standoff. I'm saying, based upon what Mr. Kaplan was suggesting, if we grant conditional approval,
Right.
then ADEQ can make a decision one way or another.
Well,
Is that what I heard?
I really kind of need a nod from Director Hines to go into that. Okay. What the language I drafted tries to do 2 things. One is it says that for purpose of review of the facilities by ADEQ, we're granting the conditional use permit so that it's granted, so that they've got something they can go forward with. And then it has a section on the final effective date of the resolution with 4 conditions. One is that they get the appropriate permits. The second is that they bring the permits to the clerk's office to be made an exhibit to the resolution, which grants the CUP. That all of this get done within 6 months, and they've agreed upon that time frame. I'm not wedded to 6 months. That seemed reasonable. I didn't want it to be open. And then there will be a 30-day referendum period before everything becomes final. But that's because we've got Amendment 7, and I think that this will be treated, because of the conditions, as a legislative matter.
Okay, thank you.
I have several cards that want to speak in opposition to this. Director Hines, do you wish to comment before we hear those? Yes, I just have one. All right, go ahead, please.
I just have one quick question, Mr. Ford, because this brings up something. In your professional opinion, is there any chance that ADQ will issue a permit for this plant if they're trained professionals and ADQ staff think the treatment being proposed will present, will not protect and present a threat to public health, safety, and welfare in this area?
I think they will. They can issue a permit. I've not seen.
But what I'm saying is, if they think there's a threat to public health and safety, will they issue a permit?
No, they will not.
Okay, that's what I was
They
asking.
will not. And I've not seen a permit at this phase through the process stop at this particular phase in the process.
By them, right. Okay, thank you.
Director Fortson, you're recognized, please.
Doug, don't get comfortable. You're an environmental engineer, so you obviously have dealt with these treatment plants in multiple locations. One of the fears that has been expressed, and that whether it's a zoning question or not, one of the comments that gets made often is a reliability question. Have you seen failures in any of the package plants in which you had involvement?
There are problems with package plants, Director Fortson. Properly maintained and properly operated treatment plants, package plants like this, are fairly, they work really well and treat water good. I think they're very well.
In your experience, what's the nature of the problems?
The nature of the problems is typically operation, maybe lack of attention to operation. And I think what makes this one a little unique is that Mr. Ferguson has selected the operator from the Lotion Club and another treatment plant nearby. He's very capable to run 3 treatment plants at one time. These are small treatment plants.
In a fully developed out subdivision, what would be the volume in this plant?
The permit, the draft permit that ADQ has is a 0.4 MGD, 40,000 gallons per day will be, but we believe that the flow will be closer to 30,000 gallons per day.
That 30,000, is that intake or outflow?
That's outflow. Yes,
That's,
sir.
that's what would be
Yes, sir.
developed by the plant.
Yes, sir. It's basically around 25 gallons per minute. If you can visualize how much flow that is a small flow.
Thank you.
Director Wyrick, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. What sort of backup does this package plant have in the event that there's a power failure?
Typically, Arkansas Department of Health and ADQ require backup emergency generators for power supply before
Okay,
they
and
issue.
how, is there a specification for how long the power supply would have to be working, the backup power supply?
I think there is. I don't know what has been in the statement of basis, what the amount of time is for this one, but.
Because
they
we've
will
had
be-
ice storms and we've had tree limbs and trees down for a number of days in the past. And so I'm just curious to know what the backup plan would need to be for.
There would be an emergency power generator there sized appropriately to power the treatment plant.
Okay, I have one more question. I don't know if Mr. Ford's appropriate. I was looking at the write-up from the Planning Commission, and I was looking for information in regards to the Pulaski County. And the only thing I saw on here was Pulaski County and other agency comments were noted. How does Pulaski County weigh into this development?
They do zoning out here.
In regards to
Only that they're,
approvals?
only
or-
that, I'm sorry, Director.
I'm sorry, too.
Only, they don't have any jurisdiction either. But Pulaski County is the site of total some 60 of these plants. And so ADEQ has jurisdiction over them. They just are cited in Pulaski County. There are several hundred in Saline County.
There's not an approval process
I
through
don't
Pulaski
believe-
County?
I don't believe that there's an approval process for Pulaski County.
Don't they have a planning commission over there?
They do, but I don't know that they zone this or require a CUP for this. You have to
So-
get permitted by, of course, the State Department of Health and the ADEQ.
Okay, so this application didn't go before Pulaski County?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Director Campuris, you're recognized, please.
Just, can I ask you? So the way I understand it, there's a minimum flow that you permit for. And during the summer, that flow goes down. What happens if your capacity exceeds what is regulated during the summer?
The capacity of the wastewater treatment plant?
Yeah.
Well, that's why you go through the permitting process, Director Campuris, is you establish a flow from your treatment plant. In this case, we have 40,000 gallons per day. So ADQ takes the 40,000 gallons per day and they put it in a model based on the minimum flow.
I know that, but what happens, that's a theoretical model. What happens in actuality if the amount that you need to be able to discharge during the summer exceeds what the permit says?
I'm not following your question.
Okay. If you have a situation where you're permitted during the summer for a less amount that you can put out, and the treatment plant, for whatever reason, has a greater capacity, has a greater need than that, what happens?
Well, in this case, in many permit cases, they look at the background flow of the stream. And I think this is the answer to your question, what you're looking for. In this case, they look at the minimum background flow of Nowlin Creek. And in their statement of basis, they considered 0 cubic feet per second as the 7Q10 flow. That's no flow. So they modeled the discharge from this treatment plant based on 0 CFS. And they determined that it would meet water quality standards. They set permit limits for BOD, TSS, and the other parameters based on that analysis.
Secondly, I presume that if this is permitted and all the lots are sold, then there will be a 3-member board that takes over. Correct? Pardon me?
I'm sorry, what did you say? What board?
There'll be a 3-person board that takes over running.
The
has
improvement district.
Fiduciary responsibilities for the treatment plant.
Yes, the commissioners of the improvement district take over the responsibility.
And in that situation, Mr. Ferguson is gone.
No, they don't operate it. They just take over the responsibility. They hire the operator.
No, sir, but I presume that once all the lots are sold, Mr. Ferguson's involvement is gone.
Oh, no,
Why not?
because he's the operator. You still have to have an operator. Every treatment plant has to have an operator.
The permit will be, the wastewater, the ADQ NPDS permit will be in that company's name.
Okay, thank you.
Doug, I've got a question for you. So you mentioned there are 2 other wastewater treatment plants that flow into Nolan Creek, Alotian and another one. What are the gallon volumes of those 2 treatment plants, do you know?
Well, let me clear that up. There's only one other. Alotian flows into Nowlin Creek, and then the Water View Estates flows off into another stream. So there's only one right now that flows in Nowlin Creek. And I believe the Alotian Club's flow is about half of this treatment plant design.
20,000?
20,000 gallons.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Kaplan, does that include the presentation for the applicant at this time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
And we've got several cards, and I'll give you an opportunity to respond if there's any necessity for a response. The first card I have is from Mr. Giles, Stephen Giles.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. As you know, I'm Steve Giles, and a Little Rock attorney, statewide practice. I represent the citizens of West Pulaski County, many of whom are here tonight. Then they have anxiously been awaiting almost a year to come forward to you, and we appreciate the opportunity to let them come speak tonight. I want to express to you that what I hear over and over from my clients is they're not against development. It's not a matter of they live in homes and big lots, and they don't want anybody else out there. And the goals of the city and the citizens of West Pulaski County are aligned. It's about good development, good responsible development. We believe that does not include high-density residential subdivisions with a conditional use permit to get rid of all the wastewater from this, dumping it into Nowlin Creek treated. There's no property anywhere near this that has that kind of a density and the discharge of that much waste into the creek. We're going to address that with other speakers here. We want to thank the city planning staff and the planning commission for their decision to deny this permit based upon it being incompatible and inappropriate in this area. Also, I wanted to make a note, I don't have it written here, but please consider the Pulaski County Quorum Court's request for the city to pass a moratorium on all development until we can get our hands around it. You all asked very many good questions at an agenda meeting on this issue before, questions about how these things work and why they work. And I don't know that they've really been answered. They haven't been answered in our minds, and we've been studying this about a year. I want to also say that the city planning staff will love their language that they put, and it's really quoted out of the city code, is what your goal is, what your charge is in determining whether conditional use permit is appropriate. The proposed use will negatively impact other properties in the area, in this area. The proposed private wastewater treatment facility is not compatible with other properties in the area. Staff does not support, as a matter of policy, the addition of large-scale urban residential subdivision in this area. And I'll just add that does not bring the essential infrastructure with it, in this case, public sewer system. I want to make a couple of points here from Mr. Kaplan's presentation to you. I think there was some confusion about who goes first, as Mr. Carpenter addressed, and Doris Wright asked the question. There was House Bill 1550 now is Act 987, passed into law, and the last session puts the policy for the city to act first in the conditional use permit. So I think this matter about approving it if ADEQ, I don't think it comports with the intent of the state law. The other thing is Mr. Kaplan confused the point of discharge analysis by the ADEQ as akin to the city's analysis, your analysis of whether this is compatible. That's just totally not the case, because ADEQ staff does not take into consideration the surrounding area, the homes, the development patterns, and all of that stuff. It's just the chemicals coming out of the pipe. So, but you do have that authority under conditional use. And as many of you know, the Little Rock case of Rolling Pines Limited Partnership versus City of Little Rock, the Court of Appeals established that even though a development complies with the minimum standards of the subdivision regulation and other applicable regulations, the Planning Commission, and now you as a board sitting on appeal, have discretion to determine whether it's compatible with the area. And so that's a much broader scope of review than ADEQ gives this, and that's why we're asking you to consider that very carefully and deny this permit. We all want property that protects the public health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, and compatible development that will not negatively affect other property in the area. I have 3 speakers lined up, and I don't know who else has turned in cards, but we've been working quite a long time getting a very condensed, fact-filled presentation to you, so we'll do it as quick as possible. First will be Mr. Drew Kelso, then we'll have Dr. Harold Hedges in Sanford. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Giles. Drew Kelso, you're recognized, please.
Mr. Mayor, directors, my name is Drew Kelso. I live in West Pulaski County in the ETJ. We have prepared a presentation tonight in an effort to help you with your deliberations and respond to any questions you have regarding this application. Mr. Kaplan said that he did not think it was within the city's expertise to make a decision about the CUP. Director Compuris a few weeks ago also said he was frustrated that they were being put in a position, the ADEQ was putting the board in a position to try to make a decision about something that you did not understand. Our presentation, when we finish, you will have the knowledge and the expertise to make the decision as it needs to be done relative to the city's business. You don't have to be a chemist or an engineer to understand what the problems are with this particular practice. I have prepared a presentation of 7 facts. Fact number 1, next slide, please. It's a foregone conclusion that there's going to be development and growth in West Pulaski County. It's essentially the only way that the city of Little Rock can grow. Next slide, please. With the growth in the ETJ, more developers will be pursuing a high-density subdivision using private sewage treatment plants. By the way, that's a WWTP. Discharging ultimately into the Little Maumelle River. Now, subdivision-owned and operated sewage treatment plants are not the solution for development. R2 zoning in the ETJ is not appropriate. It is not the same thing when municipal sewer is not involved. Mr. Kaplan tried to move this to be strictly a zoning issue. It's a zoning issue where there is no municipal sewer, and that really needs to be considered. Growth in the ETJ is simply outpacing Little Rock's ability to provide required infrastructure. Now, Little Rock is not alone in this problem. A recent development in Faulkner County, there was a subdivision called Woodlands Edge that called for packaged sewer treatment plants that would ultimately discharge into Lake Conway. The ADEQ director, Mrs. Keogh, told the PC&E commissioners that even though they had to issue this discharge permit as required by law, she was almost apologetic. They continued to work with Conway Corp to extend municipal sewer to that subdivision as the preferred option. In her own words, it was a win-win. Next slide, please. In the ETJ, the receiving streams for all the discharge from the sewer plants are all tributaries of the Little Maumelle River. You could look at a map, but all treated wastewater, whether it's in Nowlin Creek, Fletcher Creek, or some other creek in the ETJ, is going to flow into the Little Maumelle River. And that's runs right through the heart of the ETJ. There are no less than 7 recreational areas located on those streams on the Little Maumelle watershed. They are the 4-H Center, the Fern Cliff Camp, Okatoma Camp, Joseph Pfeiffer Camp, the Pinnacle Mountain State Park, the Nature Conservancy at the ranch, and then ultimately it flows right back into the city at Two Rivers Park. So there's 7 recreational facilities. If you pass the CUP for the plant on Nowlin Creek at 30,000 gallons a day, and possibly another one called the Trails on Fletcher Creek, you would have over 100,000 gallons per day flowing into the Little Maumelle River and then subsequently into Pinnacle Mountain State Park. If there were 2 more passed a year for the next 10 years at approximately the same sizes, there would be 1 million gallons of treated wastewater flowing through Pinnacle Mountain State Park and right into Two Rivers Park. Next slide, please. If the sewage plant treatment is engineered, built, operated, and maintained correctly, the discharge limit set by the ADEQ can be met, but the plant is still polluting. Now, the question always gets asked, do these package plants work? It was asked of Mr. Ford just a few minutes ago in a different forum. And then someone starts talking about dissolved oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, fecal chloroform, parts per million. We all roll our eyes and throw up our hands and say, we're not engineers, we're not chemists, we can't understand that. But you don't have to be to understand what the problem is. If a sewage plant is meeting the discharge limit set by ADEQ, it is still polluting. It's just polluting at a level below the discharge limits. The pollution is still there. A permit from the ADEQ is a permit to pollute. If there is no pollution, you don't have to go to them to get a permit. So if you have 20 plants discharging all into the same watershed and they're all meeting the ADEQ requirements, then you have 20 times the amount of pollution that would be done by a single plant. That's just mathematics. Now, so ADEQ has never implemented a process to control or limit the number of discharging plants on a single stream or in a single watershed. Some people would like to mislead you that it was different than that. But you go ask Becky Keogh that very question. Have you implemented an anti-stream degradation policy in the state of Arkansas? She will say no. Next slide, please. Now, these plants can and do break down over extended periods of time, causing pollution. Now, the developers say, and we've heard it tonight, these plants work and they are safe. Of course they would, but it all depends on the operation and the maintenance over time. Mr. Ford said that. It depends on the operation. In the last 2 years, there have been 3 major failures of subdivision-maintained sewage treatment plants in Arkansas that have made it all the way to the PC&E Commission agenda. Their names are Chico Sewer, Flushing Meadows, and Marble Falls. These were truly serious problems. Other serious problems at the ADEQ and in the news are Huntington Estates, Callaghan Creek, Blackstone Ranch, Washington Improvement District 5, that's pretty current, West Fork Communities, and this week in the news was Cherokee Village Sewer. Now, Director Hines, all due respect, you said, do you think that ADEQ would issue a permit if they thought this was going to be a health and safety problem for its citizens? That's a good question. The real question should be, ask ADEQ, have they ever issued a permit that became a health and safety issue for the citizens? And the answer to that will be yes. And there they are. Now, the PC&E Commission, at the PC&E Commissioners meeting in August of last year, the ADEQ director said these subdivision maintained plants have a 50% failure rate. Go back and look at the notes. In Washington County, that's where Fayetteville is, they report 9 failures out of 12 existing plants for a failure rate of 75%. And have recently added staff and passed a tax to keep up with the issues. It is not the engineering and the science that is wrong. It is the usual stuff. Developers go bankrupt. They get into financial difficulties. Operators quit, get replaced, retire. Infrastructure ages and crumbles. Natural disasters like tornadoes and floods. Power failure. Someone asked about that a few minutes ago. Operators are often inexperienced and inadequately trained, and there's not enough money for corrective actions. Now, directors, I know you can understand those issues. That's not science, and it's not engineering. That's good old blocking and tackling 10 yards up the field at a time. Now, if you want to know if these plants work and are safe, talk to the people who are dealing with the failures. That would be my challenge to you. Talk to the people in enforcement at ADEQ. Talk to the people in enforcement at the Arkansas Department of Health. Talk to the PC&E commissioners. They've seen these cases. Talk to the environmental attorneys. And then talk to the people in municipal and county governments that have taken over these operations. Now, Mr. Kaplan brought up that there are 63 domestic wastewater discharge permits in Pulaski County. I have examined all 63 of those discharge permits. The Environmental Protection Agency makes this job fairly easy. They have a website called ECHO, EPA, and they list all of the performance characteristics of all of the discharge permits across the entire continental United States. So I found these 63. Of those 63, 37 of them are individual residences discharging less than 1,000 gallons per day. Another 15 of them are Pulaski County School District, churches, a few nightclubs, a mobile home park, a couple of apartment complexes, and $3 stores. When you weed all that out, you get down to 4 things that I think are germane to our discussion tonight, which are higher density subdivision owned and controlled developments. And these are the 4. Next slide, please. Now this is pulled right off of the EPA ECHO website as of last Friday. The first, after you get down to the 63 and you knock it down to 4, here they are. 145th Street and Water Improvement District. Mr. Mayor, you may remember this. They petitioned the city in 2011 for the city to take them over because they could not manage it. That was declined. They then petitioned the city of Wrightsville to take them over. City of Wrightsville declined. They are out there operating. Now here's how you read that chart. Red is bad. Yellow is not good. And blue is the only thing you really want to see up there. This one's pretty red. Now, notice I have the red arrow pointed to the day since last inspection. Mr. Kaplan made it seem like the ADEQ was going to be out there inspecting this thing routinely every month. They have not been to that site in 1,049 days. Next slide, please. The second subdivision is Callaghan Creek, which has been written up in the paper. You see a bunch of yellow, a bunch of blue, 1 red. I would give that a D for performance. It has not been inspected in 984 days. Next slide, please. The next one is Lock Ridge Estates, which Mr. Kaplan actually talked about. And by the way, he made it sound like improvement districts were going to be just great. This is an improvement district. And so is the 145th Street. Here we have 3/4 of red, significant violations, 5/4 of no violations, and 4/4 of non-compliance. It has not been inspected in 663 days. See the 3 bars right there, 7, 8, and 9. Let me tell you about that period of time. The reason those bars turned blue from red is the Delta Bank and Trust foreclosed on the developer at Lock Ridge and took control of the wastewater treatment plant. They put staff in charge of it, performance improved, and they forced the improvement district to pass a tax that they were reluctant to do in order to get the things going back. It has since now gone out of foreclosure, and you can see clearly that the performance record is declining. Next slide, please. The fourth one of the 4 subdivisions is Waterview Estates, which has been mentioned a couple of times tonight. Remember my statement about red is bad? That is the reddest one. If Waterview Estates happens to have that same operator that is supposed to make Mountain Valley subdivision in Alotian run really well, I would be pretty concerned. It has not been inspected since 613 days. Next slide, please. Now, the enforcement mechanisms are lacking and are not used. So who is going to enforce the regulations? Who is going to fix the problems? Now, the developer might for a while, but he wants to sell his lots and he wants to exit.
And I do not believe Mr. Kaplan when he says Rick Ferguson's going to stay there and run this operation forever. That does not occur. And so he likes to turn it over the subdivision to a POA. POAs are, of course, notoriously weak organizations. Improvement districts are marginally better. By the way, the recent legislation that passed now says you cannot turn it over to a POA. It has to be an improvement district. So that was an improvement. Now, the city's not going to enforce the regulations. We know that. The county's not going to enforce the regulations. That's done. We want to believe that ADEQ will do it. We want to believe that ADEQ has our back on it. You can tell from the questions in this room and the statements up here that that's what we really want to believe. We want to believe that if ADEQ signs off on a permit, everything is going to be fine. Unfortunately, this is not the case. And ADEQ will admit that. If they admit that kind of failure rate, would they not have to admit everything's can't be just fine? Now, we have been told by the higher ups in ADEQ, they have denied one application in 10 years. In 10 years of applying for permits. Now, we think there's a bunch of steely-eyed engineers over there and scientists that are really putting this thing through the hopes. It's not true. If they agree to meet the discharge limits, they stamp it approved. We have also been emphatically told by the ADEQ officials that if a developer applies for a permit, he will get it, and there is no hope of you stopping it. Now, no wonder everyone would like to take this over to ADEQ or the developer and say, hey, y'all approve this, everything is going to be fine. City, you don't have to worry about it. City, you need to worry about this. There are a lot of issues here. As a rule, the ADEQ does not make regular on-site inspections or do on-site test sampling. They only do so in response to a complaint. Years can pass without an inspection. You saw my 4 slides up there. The average number of days since those 4 places were inspected is 827. That's over 2 years since an inspector has even been there. So these plants are self-monitoring. The ADEQ assumes that the operator is going to do timely and accurate testing and reporting and send the results to them. Only after they receive those reports and process them do they know if there's a problem or not. This can take weeks and months. If they find violations, they begin writing letters. By the way, they don't email you, they don't call you. They actually write a letter. I guess that's the problems with Freedom of Information Act. You want to document everything. And then they wait for replies. This exchange can take months, years. During this entire period, the plant is still continuing to pollute. Now, I've heard operators and developers try to dismiss many of these violations that I talk about as only be administrative and reporting problems. As you can see, the ADEQ enforcement and monitoring system is totally reliant on timely and accurate reporting by the operators. They have to take it seriously or this whole system doesn't work. Imagine what would happen if the IRS did not audit tax returns. Now, the ADEQ has the ability to fine the operators, but it's seldom used. And often the amounts are small in comparison to what it would take an operator to remedy a problem. In 2014, only 4% of the plants in non-compliance had formal actions. Only 4% of those in serious non-compliance had formal action. That's people beyond red. And the total resulting fines from these actions, the total for the entire year of 2014 was $30,575. It seems it's often cheaper for an operator or a developer to pollute than pay the fines and make the corrective action. Now, the ADEQ has the power to revoke a permit, but it's not realistic. You cannot cut houses off of sewer. That would surely be a health and safety issue. Fact 7, the last fact. There is no satisfactory mechanism for financial assurance for privately owned and maintained sewage treatment plants. Many of the examples of failed sewage treatment plants were because of lack of money to remedy problems. Not engineering, not science, lack of money. The state used to have stronger laws requiring financial assurance by wastewater operators in the form of letter of credit or surety bonds. This is like insurance, if you will. But the state legislature did away with all of this with Act 575 in 2015. This is current news, and established a trust fund concept. This trust fund concept, operators would make small annual deposits to the fund, many plants being exempt. And for example, Waterview's fee was $360. In September, the fund had $46,455 in it, not enough money to deal with one failure of one plant, and it was for the entire state. This past summer, the ADEQ director, Ms. Keogh, admitted that to the PC&E commissioners in public meeting, the fund was growing too slowly. So, due to public pressure by us and others on the ADEQ and our state representatives, there was a new House bill proposed, House Bill 1550, which was passed. It is now the new Act 987, and it was to remedy the problems caused by Act 575 in 2015. There's a lot of numbers there, I'm sorry. The good news is this new act is a vast improvement over what existed a month ago, and in time we will see if it works or not. Next slide, please. In conclusion, passing the Mountain Valley CUP or any other similar CUP would be contrary to the purpose and intent of the city code and would create, this is almost repeating Steve Giles here, but risk of jeopardizing public health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, adversely affecting citizens' property, and an unreasonable risk of destroying the Little Maumelle watershed. Number 2, subdivision-owned and operated sewage treatment plants do not work often enough over long periods of time to be a viable option. I hope I've demonstrated that case. And we find no comfort in the oversight and enforcement of such plants by the city, the county, or the state. Now, there are no bad guys in this. We just kind of have a bit of a mess on our hands, and we need to work on a long-term solution. The problem with subdivision-owned and operated sewage treatment plants has been acknowledged by Washington's Sebastian and Faulkner counties. It's been acknowledged by the Pulaski County Quorum Court. It's been acknowledged by the ADEQ director, the state legislature, and Little Rock City Planning. We ask the Little Rock City Board tonight to acknowledge there's a problem by denying this appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Kelso. Our next card is Dr. Harold Hedges. Dr. Hedges.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, directors. There have been some comments about the health and welfare that's associated with this. And if I could have the first slide, please, sir. These toxic algae blooms that are caused.
Would you, Dr. Hedges, would you pull that microphone just a little closer to you? Thank you.
These toxic algae blooms, they do affect lives. And the one treatment plant that is operational on Nowlin Creek We've got pictures of algae blooms that have occurred there since it's been put in. And we've had, in fact, I've got several pictures of those blooms. These things do affect health, both in the short and long term. Slide 1, please. Freshwater harmful algae blooms, or FHAB, they can cause disease, and they do cause disease in humans and death in domesticated and wild animals. One of the reasons you don't see much activity or any reporting is there is no tracking of these diseases in the state of Arkansas. I talked with the people at Arkansas Health Department, and they've never put anything forward to have these things tracked. And in any kind of, we try to track measles, mumps, chicken pox, E. coli, and the like. And even when you have something in place that doctors, dentists, and the like are supposed to report, the reporting is not very good. Some of the diseases and problems that are associated with algae blooms include skin rashes, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Liver problems seem to be a big one, even neurologic symptoms in both animals and in humans. This is not a new problem, but it's a problem that's affecting every state, both in streams and lakes, and you'll read from time to time the E. coli problem that we have that closes down our lakes, and you can't swim in it, you can't touch it, you can't boat in it, and the like. You don't find much in the way of anybody doing this for the algae blooms and the problems that they have with algae blooms. Next slide, please. The University of Chicago has done some work in this, and one of the journals says the effects of wastewater treatment plant discharges on ecosystems, structure, and function. Quote, "We found evidence that even efficiently created wastewater can have extensive effects on stream ecosystems, structure, and function. Therefore, adequate dilution rates always should be considered when routing treatment wastewater through networks. If this wastewater goes in the Arkansas River, it's not a problem. It's a big problem on Nowlin Creek. Nowlin Creek goes dry, D-R-Y, dry. There is no flow in Nowlin Creek from about May this last year till November. And we have pictures of a dry Nowlin Creek all the way up to November. What happens with the lotion, where that is discharged, it's discharged into a pool, and a pool that never dries up. And I'll grant you that whatever comes out of that pipe into Nowlin Creek from a lotion it sets the standard, it's under the standard, and it's okay. But the longer it sits there in that pool, bacteria don't just sit there and do nothing. Bacteria multiply big time. And when you've got the right chemicals plus the bacteria, then you have an algae bloom. And it's called it's a cyanobacteria just because of the color it produces. Now, at what point does this have to be polluted, or what point, how much pollution do you have to have, or bacteria count do you have to have? Nobody knows when it's a dangerous situation. It's long before you see the scum all over the water. When you see the scum over the water, you know you shouldn't be swimming or doing anything with it. But it's polluted before you see that. And illness can happen before that even occurs. Next slide. This is Nowlin Creek between rains. Nowlin Creek looks like this from June to November, no flow. And the only time we see flow is when we have a big rain. And what happens with a situation from a lotion is we'll have enough flow just to move the bacteria, the chemicals, to the next pool with a dry interim, and then the next pool. So this is kind of how these things spread down a creek or a body of water.
This is near the site of the planned effluent discharge. And again, in pools, the bacteria plus chemicals multiply, and you have the algae bloom and the toxic situation. Stagnation increases damage to any ecosystem, and this effect has been measured up to 0.62 miles downstream from any discharge. Next slide, please. I think this was taken in, this is Nowlin Creek in the fall of 2016. Again, it was dry all the way up to November of this last year. It got cleaned out last week, I can tell you that for sure. Next line, please. Next slide. This is the algae bloom that occurs from the discharge from Alotian. You'll see the bridge, that's the bridge that is over Goodson Road. The discharge site is down in the left-hand corner. Now, if you turn around, next slide, please, and take a picture of the water on the other side of the creek, it just does not have anything like the scum on that side. Next line. Last year, I took water from near the side of the discharge area, and I reported when I went before the Planning Commission that I did assume that the sample that I took from that water complied with all the rules and regulations, bacteria count, chemical count, and I assumed that it was okay, but it was not sterile. It is not sterile. It has bacteria in it, and it also contains the chemical nitrogen, phosphates, and the like. That's the perfect formula for algae growth and water pollution. Next slide, please. HABISS. This is data funded by the National Center for Environmental Health, NCEH, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and this data was collected and compiled and published in 2015. It's called the HABIS, HABISS report. And the report only covered 11 of our 50 states. Most of our states are not even reporting a lot of these things, but in Arkansas is not reporting. Next slide, please. What they found of these 11 states, there were 458 suspected or confirmed human cases of illness and 175 cases of animal morbidity and mortality cases during that 2007 to 2011. Underreporting, as I said before, is an issue in any kind of medical reporting. And so we really don't have a good idea of how much disease, both chronic and acute, does occur. And this only accounted for acute events. Chronic illnesses are not even known. Next slide, please. A lot of states now are developing guidelines for informing the public about the risks of disease so that the public can get involved in looking at a disease and the possibility that that disease came from a pollution or a polluted area. I've talked with ADEQ in the Arkansas State Health Department over the last 2 years since all this began, and we were not very far along in the process. And I'm not aware to date that we have any mandate or semi-mandate that we need to be reporting, that we have to report these things. When you think about children, because of their size, they have, they're especially at risk because of the lower body weight and the toxic effects on development of children. And who plays in the water? If you've got a body of water around, you've got children, it's difficult to get children not to play in water, or adults many times. Next line. Next slide. Up and down Nowlin Creek, there are families with children, grandchildren, and I've got 3 great-grandchildren who live and play around Nowlin Creek. I live on the creek, so I see it every day, day in and day out. Pinnacle Mountain State Park, where children and adults picnic and play a lot. It's just downstream. and they would be subjected to the pollution that's occurring now in any addition. Because of the known toxic effects of algae blooms in pools between the creek beds and our small streams, we ask for a denial of the discharge of wastewater effluent from Mountain Valley subdivision and any other similar projects. And again, and I'm not sure how much global warming is playing into this worldwide, but this is a big problem, and it's become bigger every day and every year. Just monitor during this summer how many times you see in the paper about polluted water and the closing down of some of our streams for use. Thank you all.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Hedges. The next card I have is from Sanford Tollett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, to the board. You've heard all the evidence, and the reason I'm here is because the evidence was very shocking. For 41 years, I've run Joseph Pfeiffer Kiwanis Camp, and for 90 years, the Downtown Kiwanis Club and the business community have supported an opportunity for children from our community and city to come out to a wilderness, recreational, wholesome experience in the outdoors. Camp Pfeiffer is located on 88 acres on the Little Maumelle River. When this situation came to me, I was just doing my job. No one polled us as citizens about the development of this wastewater treatment plant. This was done behind closed doors in business meetings. As I heard the presentation, there are hardly any people out there. And so this is not going to be close to anybody. Well, I want to say, I heard you talking about your care and concern about the children of Little Rock, Arkansas. Guess where the kids come from that come to Camp Pfeiffer? Those same kids that you are doing the PIT prevention programs for. For 41 years, I've been serving your kids. Your vote tonight is a vote about our children. You've heard the evidence. I'm the closer to change your mind if your mind has already been set. Because it's about our children, the voiceless. We can talk about the animals. Take a look at that. Behind you, or on your computer. Pfeiffer Camp, I bring your kid out and they play softball, baseball, slide into third base, get a rash, jump down in the creek and go canoeing and flip the canoe, go crawdad hunting. And all of a sudden that rash just keeps going. And there's evidence and proof of it. So now Neosporin doesn't take care of that rash. Iodine doesn't take care of that rash. All of a sudden they go home. And somewhere upstream, this wastewater treatment plant failed. The generators didn't kick in. I have 3 generators that was hit by lightning. You didn't ask what happens for the backup to the backup generator. And all of a sudden, those kids are swimming in feces. How many of you are going to take your kid down to Fush Creek and let them go crawdad hunting? Think about it. This is long-range planning. This is vision. For 41 years, when my community called me and the gangs were running rampant like they are again, I was called to help do something called the Casey Foundation, and we won, called New Futures. I was behind the scene. I went back to work. Then the city wanted to do a half-cent sales tax. I was behind the scene. I did the work, and you passed it. And somewhere along the line, things got better, and crime went down, and then we forgot. And we kind of cut money back, as Mr. Richardson was saying, and the crime went back up, and then we got back involved. And it's kind of funny, New Futures is not operating right now, and our crime has gone up again. So I had mixed emotions today. I just wanted to stay in the woods. I just wanted to stay in the woods. But I'm going to go ahead and call him out. Mr. Richardson is a Pfeiffer Camp kid. He could have been that kid out there going down in the creek in a wastewater treatment plant because he's a nobody. I kind of heard nobody's out there. Hardly anybody's out there. I'm speaking for the voiceless kids. The kids that you said tonight you're concerned about. It needs to be a no vote because those kids that come out to Camp Pfeiffer for 90 years are your Little Rock kids from every part of our community, every part of our projects, our development areas. And this development, I'm not against development. Little Rock is coming that way. We got great people out there. They want the neighbors. They want the development to happen, but they want smart development. Little Rock, Arkansas has some of the best water in the nation, got some of the best infrastructure in the nation, and we can do it right. And so the vote tonight is looking into the future, not yielding, not yielding to pressure, but yielding to the right thing to do. And if you say you're concerned about kids, you take a look at that slide. It could be your grandkid, it could be your cousin, it could be your great-grandkids in the future, because they're not gonna know. And nobody's gonna tell us when it fails, because it didn't tell us when they wanted to put it in. You made a great comment, Director Warwick. What is the backup? And what is the backup to the backup? Director Hines, we're an evidence-based program. For 41 years, I can give you all the data and information and long-term and research, even working with parents. It's been 41,000 kids on my watch from this community. I'm here defending them, the voiceless. And if you were really concerned about our children, then you'd give a no vote. And you'll go back to the drawing boards and put in a plan that satisfies everybody. A good friend of mine that was a great corporate leader told me it's always good to find the intelligent compromise. And I'll close with that. Have a good evening.
All right. We have some other cards. Travis Porter. Mr. Porter?
Mr. Mayor, Board, thank you very much for hearing me. My name is Travis Porter. I live in the extraterritorial area of the city. And my concern about this comes from a specific condition in the permit drafted by the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality. In the interest of full disclosure, I worked for ADEQ several years back in the air permits group, so I know something about permitting. In this permit, specific condition 13 identifies the sampling type and frequency to be performed on the discharge from this proposed waste treatment plant. Now, adequate sampling and testing of the discharge is essential to assure that the plant is operating properly and conforming to the specified limits on the parameters identified in the permit. This condition identifies 8 parameters to be measured on the discharge of the permit, and it identifies the frequency with which those parameters are to be sampled. The first parameter, flow through the process, is to be measured twice a week. Okay, that's easy. The other 7 parameters, including fecal coliform, are required to be measured by taking a grab sample only once per quarter. That's once every 90 days. Or for this plant, it's about a grab sample for every 1 to 1.2 million gallons that are being processed through the plant. Frankly, this sampling plan doesn't pass the smell test. Now, the basis for this sampling plan is an internal memo dated July 16, 1993, and issued by the Arkansas Department of Pollution Control and Ecology. That shows you how old it is. That's the predecessor, of course, to ADEQ. All right, flip my page here. There is a science behind developing a sound sampling and testing plan for a facility. It's a process that involves the collection and analysis of a lot of data. And frankly, I don't see evidence of this in this permit. If this exercise were performed on this facility, one would end up with some sampling frequency. But I can feel pretty confident in saying that it wouldn't be 1 grab sample every 90 days, and it probably wouldn't be the same frequency for each of the 7 parameters that are measured. So in my view, the sampling and testing frequency specified in this pending permit does not adequately protect the people, the animals, or the environment in any area downstream of where this facility will be discharged. And it's not going to protect us against a malfunction, and there's going to be a malfunction. And frankly, with a permitted limit of from 400 to 2,000 colonies of fecal coliform per 100 cc's of water, I don't want to be around the water when the facility is functioning properly, much less when it malfunctions. Thank you very much.
The next card I have is from Ruth Bell.
I'm Ruth Bell. I'm with the League of Women Voters, and I'm glad that the legislature decided that homeowners associations weren't adequate to manage a wastewater facility, but I'm not sure an improvement district is that much of an improvement. However, I'm moving right along to the fact that previous speakers have more than accurately pointed out that these package plants do fail, and that the 4 that currently exist dealing with subdivision-sized concentrations are not in great shape. The financial costs of that kind of failure are a concern to us, as well as the health and safety issues, because some of the money to pay for damages if those plants fail will become available eventually through the revised state fund that the last legislative session fixed better. But it's going to be slowly accumulating from pay-ins from existing plants and new approved plants, and it will take a while to be big enough to pay off if a subdivision plant had a failure and really backed up in everybody's basement. The damage costs the homeowner can get some damages from their own home insurance policy, but not much, which means that probably you all would be asked to make some contributions to these damages as well, since if you did improve this as part of your duties as a city official. Anyway, it can be costly. These failures can be very costly, and some of it can be very costly to the city. In addition, because we are, as a league, very fond and supportive of long-range planning, having the potential of plinking down very urban-style subdivisions in very ex-urban locations not only is highly inappropriate, but also is highly detrimental to the city's long-range planning. And for both those reasons, I would hope that you would reject this appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Next card I have is from Tom Frothingham.
Mr. Mayor, directors, I'm Tom Frothingham. I'm the president of the Nowlin Creek Neighborhood Association, and I'm an organic farmer. I've been selling produce to Director Peck for actually decades now. 30 and a half years. I think all the points I was going to make have been made by the previous speakers, and I know that you all have been here in this room for a very long time today, so I'm just going to pass on the rest I was going to say, and we can get on with business.
Thank you, Mr. Frothingham. Yeah, I'm trying to take an inventory on how many people have not taken a break to go to the restroom from the board. How many? There's a few of us left. Okay. The last card I have is from Mr. Robert Walker.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. I want to point out that this developer, all he has to do is put in large lots, and everybody can have their own septic tank and field, and he will not have to have something that discharges into the public waterways. That's all. Or he could connect a sewer line to that fine sewer plant we built in West Little Rock, and he can put in a residential tower. It's this middle thing that he wants to do, this gimcrack plant. I want to point out, I want to remind you the famous plant that was built at Dogpatch, when Dogpatch, the failed amusement park, they built a sewage plant and it failed. It discharges into the National River as a failed sewage plant. And part of the problem with deciding what happens, how much damage a hog farm is doing to our National River, is that the dog plants plant is discharging just a few miles away, and we can't tell what the algae bloom is coming from, whether it's the dog patch sewer plant or the hog farm. Now, I volunteer at the Billy Mitchell Boys and Girls Club. Thank you all for the money that y'all contribute to keep it running. One of the staff members there wants to take the kid with some of this recreational money. He wants to take him canoeing. He's not going to take him to the Buffalo River or the Spring River or anywhere else. He's going to take him someplace he can get to. The Little Maul River is a major recreational resource for the citizens of Little Rock. He wants to take those kids paddling, and that's where he's going to go. And I don't want him to paddle through something where the water is the outflow from a sewage treatment plant. Please don't allow this. I think that's real simple. It won't be good for them. It won't be good for us. You will degrade a major recreational resource for Little Rock if you allow this.
That concludes the cards that I have. Mr. Kaplan? Yes, sir.
I turned in a card and I put the wrong number on it. I put 20 in.
Are you Mr. Corbin?
Yes.
Come forward, please. Yes, you did, but that's okay. Come on forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Board of Directors. Through the Sierra Club, I've been gone to a lot of hearings by ADEQ and know a lot of what they've done. I know people whose water and property were polluted by fracking in the Fayetteville Shale. ADEQ didn't help them. I've been to many hearings over the Turk Power plant in Hempstead County. ADEQ, among many other things that were bad, they okayed dumping liquid waste from the plant into the Little River. That included scrubber waste, coal ash leachate, coal leachate, and chemicals. Dump it in that pristine river. Sure, it goes to the Gulf of Mexico, which is already too polluted. Our Environmental Pollution Agency had a workshop here 3 or 4 years ago, and lots of people were invited. 100 or 150 were there. But the organizers told me that they went to the Health Department, ADEQ, and other agency that should be concerned, Department, the Public Health Department, I can't think of the word, but out there on the Public Health place, they would not allow but just 5 or 6 people to come to this. They wouldn't allow it. I don't understand ADQ. They've got the expertise, but they okay anything, supposedly for jobs, I think. Now, I'm not so enthusiastic about Little Rock growing. I think we need to make Little Rock a better place to live than it is now. There's lots of empty lots south of I-30. Yeah, poor people live there. Well, I don't think they should be run out, but we need to work out where people can live together. Anyway, I thank y'all for your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Corbin. Okay, that concludes the cards that we have. Mr. Kaplan, do you wish to respond to any items that have been brought to our attention?
Well, if I were to respond to every one of them, I think that we'd be here for another day or two. What I can say is that you have heard a doomsday report. And if you follow what has been said about not only the failing ADEQ, but the mismanaged ADEQ, and the ADEQ, which doesn't do anything to fulfill its responsibilities under the Clean Water Act, the Federal Clean Water Act, and its designations. After all, the Clean Water Act designates to state agencies the responsibility for enforcement of the Clean Water Act. If all of that you heard is accurate and true, we should be seeing pestilential outbreaks and problems with massive illnesses and scourge throughout the state. And we don't hear that. We don't see that. If you look at any creek in this city, in this state right now, whether it has discharge or not, there is going to be bacteria in that creek and you can't drink from it. There is no doubt that you can't drink from a creek unless you put a little bit of water, one of those pills in it. I know my son is a camper and is going to be in the Appalachians, on the Appalachian Trail next week. He doesn't drink from anything there, all of these pristine creeks, unless you purify the water, and it's true everywhere. Now, let me just go over a few of the things that Mr. Kelso said. He says, well, this is the number 1 through 6 or 7, foregone conclusion there's going to be growth in West Pulaski County. Couldn't agree more. You all know that's going to happen, and I'm sure that you're all in favor of that. He said more developers will be pursuing high density. It's already zoned for high density. It's true. I suppose more developers will as more jobs come along Highway 10. And that growth in the ETJ is outpacing the ability to deal with it now. That's true. He said everything will flow into the Little Maumelle River. That's true also. And there are sewer treatment plants, including Little Rock, that flow into the Arkansas River. I mean, that's where treatment plants go, into polluting. And he says if the plant is operating properly, the plant is still polluting. You know, the natural environment, people who are fertilizing with Scots or whatever onto their lawns, people who have dogs and allow their dogs to run loose, people who have cattle and chickens and all of that, when the rain comes, it washes into those creeks and into those rivers. It happens all the time. He's right. When a plant is operating properly, it is still polluting because it is not absolutely 100% sterile. Nothing that discharges is 100% sterile. Now, and I think all of us here know that in the long run, everybody's complaining about the long run, that something is going to break down in one of these treatment plants. Well, in the long run, and it's not too long, I think all of you know that in addition to the water that's already out in West Little Rock in the ETJ, that there'll be sewer out there too. I don't know that any of you have any doubts, but that it will be out there. Mr. Ford can address some of the technical issues that are raised. I think that all of that comes down to, all of what they said comes down to, is one, you ought to be the super ADEQ because you have the opportunity to bypass the ADEQ. And two, the ADEQ isn't worth a darn. It isn't worth anything at all. But that's what we have. And we know because there isn't the kind of scourge all over the state and that we don't have outbreaks of illnesses from coliform, E. coli all over the state near any of these developments where there are wastewater treatment plants. And there isn't a public health hazard in Saline County where there are dozens and dozens and dozens of them, that it just doesn't happen. And ADEQ is fulfilling their responsibilities under the Clean Water Act, or the federal government would have taken them over already, because that's what happens. If they are not complying with the Clean Water Act, they are taken over, and they are the delegation from the federal government under the Clean Water Act to the states is revoked. And it hasn't been revoked. Now, I know that Doug can't, do you want to answer some of these other things?
Mayor and Board of Mayor and Board of Directors, I know we've been here a while, so I'll be brief.
Typically give them a little bit.
The numbers, the technology that has been spoken about tonight is not magic. It's not derived from on a Ouija board. It doesn't fall down from the heavens. ADEQ is a good organization. They're smart folks over there. They're well trained. They receive a lot of training. There's regulation number 2, the water quality standard in Arkansas, and ADEQ with EPA established limits on water bodies in Arkansas, not just Nowlin Creek, but the Arkansas River, the White River, the Spring River, and all streams and water bodies in Arkansas, from chlorides to BOD to pH to temperature and the various parameters, including fecal coliform. So those limits ADQ doesn't roll the dice over there and say, let's put 20 on this or let's put 10 on this. They have established water quality standards that they have to follow. They can't say the standard in the Saline River for total suspended solids is 20, so we're going to allow a treatment plant to discharge 50. That's not what they do. They follow the water quality standards. And don't be misled that they're not following the rules. So part of the treatment plant that is the draft permit is on, they were talking about, well, there'll be fecal coliform discharge. The plant has a disinfection system to disinfect fecal coliform. There's fecal coliform in water bodies in Arkansas that do not have wastewater treatment plants discharging. Fecal coliforms come from warm-blooded animals. So some of these pollutants are naturally occurring, and the board needs to know that this is not a made-up science project to just issue a permit. The folks at ADQ take their job very seriously.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. That concludes our discussion on this. Are there any questions from board members? Director Wyrick.
I had a question for Mr. Ford. I'm not a scientist, so I don't understand all the ins and outs of it, but Mr. Porter brought up the permit. He brought up the flow needs to be measured twice a quarter, or
Once
twice,
per quarter.
Flow 2 times. Anyway, he was indicating from the permit that he saw that it really was not a good standard or a good permit to follow. And I'm assuming that when you were going through what ADEQ does, then you're validating that a permit would not have less than quality standards on the permit. What does your permit say for?
The permit, the draft permit says that the 8 parameters that he spoke about will be tested at least quarterly, once per quarter, by collecting a grab sample. He's correct on that, and that's a typical sampling method for a treatment plant this size.
Okay, so it's typical, but it doesn't exceed the standards, which I think these people would like to see something that exceeded the standards because they're worried about what's going to happen to Nowlin Creek.
And there was a chance, and maybe there still is a chance to change that to once per month, something.
Okay, so
I'm not a regulatory person, so I'm
Yeah,
not speaking
okay,
to
I
that.
apologize.
And there's laughter, but I don't know.
I was just curious. And then the reports that they showed, the failures versus the no problems. Do you have any comment about the reports from the 3 or 4 treatment plants that he showed graphs on?
I don't. I haven't reviewed that data. I would have to go on ADQ's database and look at those plants individually and review the inspection reports and enforcement actions and so on and so forth.
Would those reports be based on the permit standard that we just talked about?
Yes, ma'am, they would be based on a violation of one of those permit limits.
One of the 7 or 8 permit limits. Okay.
Right. This plant has a proposed 8 parameters to test for. Other plants may have 10 or 12. They may have more, depending on what type of permit it is.
Okay. Would you agree from the report that they gave us that those were bad reports?
Those were not good reports, correct?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, all right, let me go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you all very much for your comments. Is there a motion to call the question? Director Hines?
Thanks, Your Honor.
Well,
I mean, you're,
the question's been called and seconded, I believe. Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. A vote, and just to explain to everyone, a vote yes or a vote aye would be to rescind the Planning Commission's action in denying the conditional use permit. A vote no or nay would be to deny the conditional use permit. Everybody understand? Well, okay, I'll say it again. A vote yes would be to approve the resolution, which is to rescind the Planning Commission's action. The Planning Commission's action was denying the conditional use permit. So if you approve the Planning Commission's action, that would be a vote no. A vote no.
I think another way of saying is if you vote yes, the CUP is approved. If you vote no, it's not approved.
That's correct. All right, all in favor of rescinding the Planning Commission's action indicate by saying aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. And the nays have it. All right, thank you very much. That concludes the issues on our agenda. Director Richardson, you're recognized.
Yes, I'd like to change my vote. I was still confused down here, so my vote is yay.
All right, just please, if I can have some order. Director Richardson is changing his vote to a yes vote. Just want to, and with that will be so recorded. It does not change the decision of the Board of Directors. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed say nay. We're in adjournment. Thank you.